Inflation is a shit show. They say to buy the dip though. Don't say what to get though. Amazon or crypto. Well, let me keep it simple. Close my eyes and rub my nipple. For shizzle, McDizzle, it's time to buy some Ripple. Okay, that was a little over the top. I do apologize. Welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is McKay, and in today's episode, we are going to discuss Ripple or XRP, as the chart's looking pretty good. Now, of course, we're going to discuss Bitcoin a little bit after the dump that was today, and then the recovery bounce that's, taking place following that dump. We're going to discuss kind of some validations and invalidations of what would make it, in my eyes at least, a potential bear trap, and we'll see higher prices, or is it just a little bounce and that's it before, it rolls over and we see further downside. So we'll discuss that in today's video, as well as a little bit of an XRP update and kind of how I'm playing that particular coin. And if that sounds interesting to you guys, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. I just want to quickly start out on the SPX or the S&P 500. Now, this is the 4-hour chart, and this was something I was looking at earlier today before I opened up the long that I'm going to talk about shortly on XRP. Just to kind of show you what my mindset was. Now, this is the SPX, like I said, which we know kind of is the driver for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the driver for the altcoins, but ultimately it's just a trickle-down effect, right? And what I was looking at and waiting for to close, and I sent a message in my Telegram group talking about XRP specifically, as far as there being some divergence potentially in play, and I was waiting for the 4-hour candle to close. I didn't mention this in my trading group, but what I was really watching that got me looking at XRP to begin with was this potential bullish divergence on the XRP. Now, we'd had this, low here and a lower low here, right? But on the RSI down here, you had a higher low that was basically getting confirmed. If we would have seen the RSI drop below 30, then it would have, invalidated that idea. But that was the first thing I was looking at. That's a pretty significant time frame, at least for a short-term bounce, was the 4-hour, which is what we're seeing play out now, or at least since, the time that I had spotted that potential. At the time, it was just possible. The candle hadn't actually closed. In fact, it was super early this morning, and the trading had just begun. But going into the weekend, as long as we didn't dump to start today, and we were able to close the first 4-hour session, it was going to confirm that divergence for me, which is now confirmed. It's, it looks like it's starting to play out. And so that was the first thing I looked at. Now, this is the ES1, which is just the E-mini futures. This trades after hours, and I've been watching this as well for a potential double bottom. If you kind of look at price action as it's come down in this little wedge, it put in this bottom, a little bounce right there, right? And now we have another potential bottom. There is the wick below, but the candle actually closed up above at the same level as this green box. This box is key to me, and I discussed this in my last video, that if we lost this level, that I would expect, especially if we lost it on a 4-hour candle and closed, 2 below it, candle bodies that is, and we confirmed this as resistance, that I was expecting us to trickle lower, which would probably be the ammunition needed for Bitcoin to break that 18K support and retest the previous low at around 17,500. So far that has not happened. Doesn't mean it still can't happen. This may just be a short-term bounce before we ultimately test that support again. So we'll keep an eye out for it. What would invalidate the downside and validate a potential bear trap, which we're going to discuss also on the Bitcoin chart and what prices we're watching, would be if we regain this level that was support here, right? If we regain this level at about 37.50, we'll call it, and flip that as support, then I would expect this double bottom to start to play out. In fact, the real level that would confirm the double bottom would be a break of 3,800-ish. So if we get back above that and flip that as support, at that point you can kind of expect us to kind of come back up here in this area somewhere, start testing some of these areas back here. In fact, we'll make another box so we can follow up on it in a future video if this were to happen or does happen. Somewhere up in here would be somewhere I would expect us to potentially retest as resistance. I also had mentioned in that last video that if we did break higher, or we confirmed this as support, that at some point we could see a bounce back up to retest these 200 moving averages. Now, this is on the daily chart here, but that would kind of be in confluence with this area. So this is kind of the area that I'll be keeping an eye out for. If we're able to flip some of this short-term resistance back as support, like I just discussed, this area here, and we start trending higher, what would that look like on the Bitcoin chart? Let's head over here to the Bitcoin. Now, this is the CME chart, and I was discussing this with one of my I was gonna say coworkers, but we don't work together. Colleague, I guess you could say. Just one of my friends that's in my trading group. We were discussing kind of these trend lines as far as he had a chart where he had mentioned there was a breakout of this, long trend line that dates back to the all-time high, right? I had mentioned that, well, on CME, technically that had already broke out, clear back over here. If you kind of zoom in down here on October 4th, that was the actual breakout, at least on the CME chart, of that trend line. However, it had this trend line just overhead, which actually had more touches and especially more recent. You had basically 1, 2, 3, 4. So this already had more touches and more recent than this entire trend line up here that really only had 1, 2, 3 touches. But anyway, right now it's kind of finding itself compressing or getting, stuck between the two, right? So as far as that's concerned, or what I'd be eyeing, so far this lower support is holding up. But if we do ultimately get rejected again by this same trend line that has been acting as resistance, like I said, on 1, 2, 3, 4 occasions, 5 occasions. This is the 5th time here. If this is the 6th time, it should act as resistance. At that point, this is ultimately a descending triangle, right? This entire thing is a descending triangle. You'd have to think lose support and we're going to see lower prices. However, until it happens, it's just an if then, right? If it does break down, then we short the breakdown. If it were to break out of this and flip this orange box above that I've drawn at about no, sorry, that's our next level. We're getting ahead of ourselves. If we were to flip this trend line back as support, let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit more. This is on a daily chart, so of course this is pretty zoomed out price action. But if on the short term, we were to flip 19,750-ish to 19,800, which if I draw a horizontal line on here, we'll go ahead and switch it to white just to represent kind of more of short-term resistance and support. You can see this area back in here was support, kind of along in here most recently it's been resistance. If we break above that level, which would also put us above this trend line that's been acting as major resistance over the past, ever since June. If we break above that, that'd be flipping basically a support and resistance level that's been holding us down horizontally, and that trend line at the same time. That could be a major flip, and you'd probably see a pretty quick run up to 21,000 in my eyes. Most likely that would only be a short-term resistance. Then we'd probably see something like 21,800 and maybe even higher over time, maybe over the next couple of weeks. And that's something we'll keep an eye out for. But as far as, to me, invalidation or validation levels to the upside would be if we break and we get at least a 4-hour candle body close above 19,000, we'll just say 800 to make it even, then I would expect those upside targets. Otherwise, what would validate this as being the 6th time as resistance, this trend line, would be if we come back down and lose this support again. If we test the range lows again down here at about 18,100 to 18,000, which is kind of what we tested today. At that point, you got to think that we're going to go back to the lower prices of back. This is CME, so it doesn't actually show. In fact, on CME, we put in a new low. This is the lowest wick we've seen on CME, down here at 17,860. But spot action had a wick, a few months ago that was around 17,500. So, in fact, we can go over here to like the. Let's see, this is a chart. This is Binance's chart. And so back here you can see this wick at about 17,550. If this ends up acting as resistance again, which is just yet another lower high, high, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, and this could be confirmed as yet another lower high. If we go back down and retest that range, this is the time you've got to kind of think that, hey, this descending triangle, which is a bearish pattern, should most likely break down, and we're going to at the very least retest 17,000, like I said, around 17,550, 17,600, and most likely we break down from there and test the targets I talked about in yesterday's video, somewhere down around, 16,000, a little bit over probably to start, see a short-term bounce from there. So we'll just keep you guys posted on that. All right, now it's time for the fun stuff, and that would be XRP. I'm going to quickly talk about that. Now this is the XRP versus Bitcoin chart. This is daily chart. For those of you who aren't familiar with looking up a coin versus Bitcoin pairing, let me just briefly explain. Apologize to those of you that already are aware of this, but I'm going to take about a minute just to explain. So what this essentially means is that if you're looking at this chart, which is the XRP versus its Bitcoin pairing, just like, looking at a normal chart, you have green and red candles, right? Well, anytime that it prints green, it just means in this case for that day, XRP outperformed Bitcoin. It doesn't mean that the price of XRP versus the dollar went up. Like if you would have bought, XRP at a certain price with $1, it doesn't mean that it went up the next day and is worth more for your dollar. It just means that it outperformed Bitcoin. They both could have went down, but XRP went down less than Bitcoin did from a percentage standpoint. Maybe there's a day where Bitcoin drops 5%, XRP only drops 3%. Well, because 3 is better than 5 as far as, that goes, it would print a green candle on here. Vice versa, XRP could go to the upside. If Bitcoin were to go to the upside more than XRP, it would print a red candle on this chart because it's just telling you in that case that Bitcoin outperformed XRP. So it's a little bit of a different way of looking at a coin, and I need to put out a video on this because it's something that I almost always look at when I'm trying to gauge whether or not a coin's worth trading to me. Because at the end of the day, if it's not outperforming Bitcoin or hasn't been recently, if Bitcoin, is showing signs of a pump, or that I believe Bitcoin, my TA has told me that Bitcoin looks like it wants to go up, I'd be better off trading Bitcoin than some altcoin that it's outperforming, right? If the altcoin is not outperforming Bitcoin, why not just trade Bitcoin? On the flip side, I look at a chart like this, which hopefully that made some sense. Now let me kind of explain. So this is something that I started tracking originally back here in June. We had this downtrend, meaning that versus Bitcoin, had this high, lower high, and it broke out here, right? And if you kind of put a horizontal line here, this is an area that it previously, if we draw it as a bit of a zone, in fact, we'll put this other line about there, something like that. We were looking for it to get back out of down here and above back up into here where it previously had support, lost it there, right? Once it regained this, we'll put a vertical line there. That's what got my attention from an alert. Now, I think I put in a video, I traded it a little bit in, I believe it was July. I believe it was probably this move here, just a small little move to the upside. We'd have to look on the Tether pairing to see what that did, on the Tether pairing. But it was either that pump or this pump. I can't remember when I put that video out. I guess it's been a couple months ago. It probably actually was this one, the one in August. But anyway, at that point, you kind of had this next zone up here above it, and it just kind of ping-ponged around here. It flipped to this previous area back as support, and then it just kind of, started accumulating, right? Which, if you see a coin, accumulating even on a Tether pair for a long period of time, the longer the accumulation, the bigger the move. Doesn't mean it's going to be an upside move. It could be a downside move. This could be what's known as accumulation or redistribution. Now, in this case, clearly, since it's broken to the upside, it was more of an accumulation zone, at least versus Bitcoin pairing. Doesn't mean this is exactly what the price did on the Tether pairing. We'll go over to that shortly. But it does mean that versus its Bitcoin pair, that it flipped a previous area of resistance back into support, or I should say a previous area of support that was lost back into support, accumulated for quite a while, and then right around here, mid-September, you finally saw this big move to the upside, right, versus Bitcoin pairing, meaning that if you would have had a bunch of Bitcoin and you decided to turn that Bitcoin into XRP right around here, you would have saw the amount of Bitcoin you had go up by nearly 85%. So if you had one Bitcoin, well, and you happen to turn it on to XRP right here, well, now you'd have 1.8, 5 Bitcoin, because you'd had 85% gain, which, is pretty significant, right? Well, anyway, the only reason why I went on that little rant was just to kind of explain that often if I'm getting ready to trade a coin, I just want to see how it has been performing versus Bitcoin to determine if it's worth trading it or if I'd be better off just trading Bitcoin, because often I just trade Bitcoin. Okie dokie, so now we're over here on the XRP versus its Tether pair on the daily chart, and the same day that back here on the Bitcoin pairing that it broke above this previous area of resistance that we spoke about on September 22nd. On the Tether chart, you had this trend line here that was resistance once, twice, 3 times, this resistance dating back to the middle of April. If you zoom in, this is the day, that's the same day that it actually broke above and flipped that, trend line as a support. While simultaneously, in the more shorter term, it kind of had this little rising channel it had been working in, and it basically broke above and flipped that, at least in the short term so far, as support. So, you know, that set my alert off, and it's had my attention ever since. I've been kind of eyeing, okay, if Bitcoin shows some signs of a bounce, this is a coin I'd like to trade. And what am I watching for on this coin? Well, let's go ahead and switch over to the 4-hour chart. I'm in a trade already. I'll post that on the screen real quick just to kind of show you where I'm at on that, where my entry was. But that entry was based on this divergence right here. So you basically, if you go over here and we double click and we look down here on our, this is the RSI, you had down here between, we'll put a Alt V so you can see it, a vertical line. You had a low and a lower low, but on price action you had a low and actually a higher low. That's considered is hidden, you know, bullish divergence. Regular bullish divergence would be if the price action put in a low and a lower low, and then the RSI put in a low and a higher low. But in this case, this is what's called hidden bullish divergence. It's still a form of divergence, and often it can see, especially in a time frame like the 4-hour time frame, at least a short, you know, term bounce, midterm, depending on, you know, if it's the start of something or, you know, what you consider, I guess, short and midterm bounce. But often it can be at least a fairly decent, sizable short-term bounce. And so I opened up a trade based on that, you know, possible, which is now confirmed, hidden bullish divergence. And, you know, if you look at price action here against the Tether pair, it's also kind of in the same somewhat of a, you know, you could call it a bit of a symmetrical triangle because you kind of have this high, lower high, you know, low, higher, low. And so it's kind of just an indecision consolidation. And if it were to play, you know, itself out all the way, again, like I mentioned on the Bitcoin pairing, might be, you know, another week or, you know, more, you know, week and a half before you see a real significant move. But what I'm looking for to add to the position, just to be transparent, and I will keep you guys updated, of course, on Twitter and, you know, video I post tomorrow. But my current stop loss is just back under this blue line of previous, you know, support since we recently flipped as support, just under 40, actually I went under 41 cents, so it's just back under here a little ways at about 39.70 something. I can't remember. I'll post a screen on an update on what that exactly is, but it's just under 40 cents is where I put that. 40 cents is a psychological number. I would expect at least a short-term bounce from there, and then if, you know, things are looking weak, I can use that short-term bounce that, you know, likely would occur as an opportunity to potentially bump that stop loss off and just get out of the trade. If it doesn't get hit, if it bounces at 40 and I don't, you know, I want to get out of the trade, that'd be a good opportunity to do so. But what I'm looking for as far as, you know, if I was entering the trade now, which many of you would, you know, essentially or potentially be doing, or if I want to add to my trade, I want to see us flip this area up here, basically at 50 cents. That's a psychological number, but really sorry, not 50 cents. 54 cents, between 54 and 55 cents. And for me, 55 cents is kind of the magic number. If we can rally up here and we flip this as support, which to me would happen if Bitcoin breaks back above, you know, 20,000, you know, about 500, which wasn't an area I spoke about in today's video. We spoke more about the 19,800 level. But realistically, if Bitcoin breaks above 20,500 and starts heading up towards that 21K and beyond targets, you're going to see XRP in confluence with that, following Bitcoin break above here. Targets I'd be looking for to the upside, at least in the short term, and we kind of just, you know, revisit once these were hit if there was more potential, would first be up here at around just under 62 cents. You can kind of see this wick back here at about 62. Take some profits just under that. If it were to continue higher, we can put a horizontal line across here at about 67 cents, and then, you know, a little bit at just under 70 cents. I really think that even if we had a decent little rally, that we'd probably see some pretty darn, you know, we'd be met with some hard resistance along here. You can see this whole zone in here was, you know, it's a very important area for XRP, around 70 cents. And I'm not even saying that we're going to reach that. The majority of the profits that I take, if this does break higher, would be up here at just under 60 cents. Just because to me, that's the most realistic. You know, I try to lock in profits early and often. You know, if the whole market would probably need to be reversing, which isn't something I'm expecting. But, you know, if XRP happens to go on a little rally and do its own thing, while Bitcoin maybe consolidates for a bit or hangs out between, you know, 20,500 and say 2K, you know, you could see XRP make a rally, you know, pretty easily up to this, you know, 60 cents area and maybe even a little bit higher, maybe even up to 70 cents if, you know, it continues to remain bullish. But that would be my upside targets. Thank you guys for sticking around until the end. As always, I love and appreciate you guys. On your way out, if you haven't already, please remember to like and subscribe and have a good rest of your day.
It's tea.